One of the most important topics in Laravel, I believe, is the rate limiting. Now, I am back with my original front end page of the application, which we started way back ago. Now, what is rate limiting? Why do we need it? And how we can utilize that rate limiting functionality in Laravel? First of all, let's talk about what is rate limiting. Now, let's assume like you have a page. For an example, you have a sign up page or a login page, and you want to restrict the user, a certain user with the certain IP addresses, that they should not be able to attempt more than 3 times or 4 times the request should be sent. If every time the request is failed, so they should be shown a message like there are you hit a too many requests and you need to try after 1 minute or after certain seconds. Now that is basically a rate limiting. Now that rate limiting also comes in handy when it comes to the API part as well. So when you are dealing with the APIs, so you must ensure that you have applied the rate limiting on your APIs. If your APIs has no rate limits, obviously I'm gonna tell you like your API will blow up. So that is why the rate limiting is very important. How we can utilize rate limiting? We have two different methods and two different approaches of utilizing the rate limiting. The first is by creating the middlewares and apply that middleware on certain routes where we want to limit the requests of a user. So let's see how we can do that. I'm going back into my Visual Studio Code, the PHP Storm, and I'm going to create a new middleware. So PHP artisan make middleware, and I'm gonna name it as rate limiter middleware. Now this is going to create a new rate middleware class inside the middleware directory. So let's open that and see what we are actually having here. So right now we have only one method in the rate limiter, which is called the handle method. And now this handle method is basically passing the request to the next response or the next request. Now we need to apply the conditions or the logic in this handle method. So first of all, let's declare a variable. So I'm going to name it as protected limiter, and let's say I'm going to make it as 1, and let's also just give this an int value. So this is marked as integer. So this is basically a new thing in PHP 8. Now let's create a constructor method here, and inside the constructor I'm going to use the rate limit facade. So here we have the rate limit facade provided by the Laravel, and I'm going to use it as limiter, and inside this limiter I am going to pass $this limiter equals to limiter, this one, and remove the default value from here. Now let's also remove this integer here because we need to make sure that both matches the responses. So now let's first get the IP of the user. So in order to get the IP, we need to define the key. So basically the rate limiter takes a key and then the number of seconds or the value. So we define the key variable, and let's use the request and IP method. So this will give us the IP of the user, and now we need to check if $this limiter too many attempts. So now this too many attempts this too many attempts function will take two parameters. The first is the key, and the second parameter is the number of seconds we want to provide in, or the number of attempts we want to pass in. So sorry, not the seconds, the number of attempts we want the user to attempt or to send the request in a minute. All right, so let's say for example I need to pass the 5 requests per minute. So if this has too many attempts, let's return new response, and the response would be too many attempts. And let's also pass the code of 429. So this is basically the status code of the 429, which will declare that we have hit the too many attempts. Now if this is not the scenario, like the user still have attempts left, what we need to do is basically we need to increment the attempts by 1. So all we need to do is basically $this limiter and hit method, and this hit method we are going to use the key and increment it by 1. All right, now so what we are going to do is basically this will actually check if this has too many attempts, otherwise this will increment the attempts per second, or per one by 1 attempts this will be incremented. And you can also utilize the IP, or you can also use the maybe a token or the API key of the user. This is not basically necessary to use the IP address, but you can also use the API key or the token in case of APIs you are developing. So let's now register the middleware in the middleware providers, and then middleware's array, and then use that on the routes method or the routes endpoints. So let's go to app, HTTP and kernel, and inside the middleware we need to use the rate limiter middleware. We have it here, and let's use the class. Now we also need to use the aliases of that in order to utilize it. So I'm going to use rate limit, and let's pass the class of rate limit middleware, like so. Now if I reload the page and see, let's check if the page actually works by applying this middleware. So we have not yet applied the middleware on our web routes, but let's check if everything is working as normal. If I reload the page, we are now getting an error. So this says call to undefined method rate limiter too many attempts. The problem is that because we have used the wrong rate limiter, we need to use the cache limiter here. So we have used the facade instead of this. We need to use rate limiter of the cache method here. So now if I reload the page, now everything is back as normal. Now let's apply the rate limiter to this route endpoint. So what we need is basically we need to pass. So similarly we are using the name and middleware here, so we can also apply the multiple middlewares by using the array method, and I'm going to use the aliases that we have used, which is the rate limit. Now if I reload the page, now this one time it passed. If I reload second time, this again works. Now let's try until it fails. So we have 3, we have 4, we have 5. Now if I reload this as many times, still I see that it is working. This is not actually failing the requests. So let's see what we are actually missing here. Alright, so there was one small problem, which was like we need to pass this a number of seconds, not the number of increments or the number of attempts. We need to pass this a number of seconds. So by default this contains a 1 minute. So the 60 seconds is set to as the 1 minute. So either we pass it or we remove it. This will be by default 1 minute. So in 1 minute, how many attempts we can pass to the Laravel? So that Laravel, if there are too many attempts, then we will be shown as too many attempts error. So let's try this one more time. If I reload the page once, twice, thrice, 4 times and 5 times, now you can see we now hit the too many attempts here. Now this was the one method of using the rate limiter. Now there is one more method which is far more powerful and really useful in modern Laravel applications and in modern Laravel frameworks. And that is basically by defining the rate limiter directly on the routes without creating any kind of middleware. And let's, for now, I remove this middleware from here, and let's use the throttle middleware. Now this is the middleware provided to us out of the box by the Laravel, and inside the throttle we can tell him or tell the middleware like how many requests are we going to allow to the user in 1 minute. So by default I'm going to say 5 requests, and this one means 1 minute. We can also set this to 10 minutes, 100, or anything that we want. If we do not specify that, Laravel will automatically know like how many minutes the default value is, and we can also provide the default value in minutes here. So it could be 2 minutes, 3 minutes, and anything like that. Now if I reload the page 5 times, 4, and you can see now we have hit the too many requests here. Now once we apply this throttle middleware, the Laravel will automatically throw us this message or this error page, and the user will be blocked, and user will not be able to send any kind of request in 1 minute, maximum more than 5. So there are two types of handling rate limiting. So one is by using the middleware, which we created the middleware and we applied it onto the certain routes where we want to use them. And the second is to use the throttle middleware, which is provided to us by the Laravel out of the box. All right. So that's about it, and I will see you in the next one.